Broadcasting live from the studios of policebackground.net. This is the Police Applicant Podcast with your hosts, Ken Roybal and Donovan Heavener. All right, let's get started.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Police Applicant Podcast. And we have a very special show for you, kind of a different show for you guys today. And we have our special guest, Scott Medlin Ernie Stevens. Welcome you guys to the podcast.
Thank you, King. Glad to be here, my friend.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your book that I have my very own copy of. It's called 101 Questions to Ask Before Becoming a Law Enforcement Officer, because this job will test you. Start with the right questions. So we're going to be talking about that today. And before we get started, we want to find out about you guys. So, Ernie, give us your background. Who are you? How did you get to be Ernie? And how did you get to be where you are today?
Well, who am I? I'm the son of my parents, and they named me. Yes, I got stuck with the family name of Ernie. But I live in San Antonio, Texas. I was a law enforcement officer for 30 years. I started off in a small agency for about 2.5 years, and then I applied for the San Antonio Police Department, and in 1994, and was hired and retired in 2021. And did a little bit of everything over there too. Specialized units, was an FTO, field training officer. So I got to train the new cadets, which the probationary officers, which I found very satisfying. It was a fun job for a while. I transferred to a DWI unit, spent a lot of years on DWI, went to a gang unit, spent many years on a gang unit. And then I helped stand up the police department's very first mental health unit. And we started that December 1st, 2008 with just 2 officers. And today it's thriving with over 22 officers and detectives assigned to the team.
So how many officers were there?
To start with, it was just me and my partner. And today, 22 officers with detectives as well assigned to the team.
Wow, that's really great. You guys were ahead of the curve on that one as far as mental health goes.
Yeah, and it wasn't just standing up a mental health unit. It was also creating, peer support team. Because what we found out very quickly, Ken, was we had a great plan to go out and help the community, to respond to 911 calls in people in crisis. What we were not prepared for were officers inside of the profession that were dealing with suicidal thoughts or behaviors or other kind of substance use issues, other types of just horrible coping skills that placed them in a bad position. So we quickly had to pivot and start working on some internal procedures to help officers.
Wow, that's great to hear. There's still departments that don't have the resources that officers need. And I want to talk about that a little bit later too. And Scott, you've been on the show before. I've been on your YouTube channel. So remind us about who you are.
Well, it's great to be back on the podcast, Ken. Thank you very much. I hate Donovan couldn't be with us for this episode, but hello to Donovan. And I just, I worked at law enforcement for almost 15 years and worked regular patrol. Then I was K-9 school resource officer, and then finished it out as a part-time campus police officer. Sometimes I wander around the campus like, am I really needed here? But anyway, it was a good, safe place, and I wanted to keep it that way as best I could. But later in my career, I'd say about 10, 11 years in, I hit a real low point, and I had to work my way out of that low point on my own. And the more I learned about mental health, the more I learned about how we are as human beings, there was a lot of stuff we were not being told in law enforcement. And it quite frankly, it infuriated me, because when I found out that more cops were dying by suicide and thousands upon thousands of officers were dealing with mental health issues, I felt like I was the only one at times that was struggling. So I just started speaking about it, started writing about it. And that's what I've been doing the last 5 or so years, is speaking and writing about mindset, personal development, and how we can prevail and not just go through a career and life in survival mode. And that's it's been one heck of a journey for sure.
And how did you guys meet?
Funny story. I'll start the story because Scott, I don't know if he'll tell the truth, but we actually met on LinkedIn. I saw a lot of his content, and I was familiar with who he was. I just had never, reached out to him. And then I received a direct message from him asking if I lived in San Antonio and if I could recommend maybe some areas of town because they might be relocating as a family to move with San Antonio, and that they were going to come and visit. So I said, well, yeah, man, why don't you just come stay with me? And while you're here, we can show you around and have dinner. And, these two guys, we make these plans and we're like, yeah, that sounds good. All right, cool. See you there. And I tell my wife and he tells his wife, and my wife's like, who is this? Like, I met this person and they're staying at our house. I'm like, yeah, I got a good feeling. And I'm sure Scott, your wife said the same thing.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, she was like, wait, who you just met online?
Best friends.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we hit it off from the start, seriously, from the initial phone call. And then when we had a great time down in Texas, and then it's kind of cool because I got a few speaking gigs in San Antonio, so I've been able to go down there. Or a few years ago, I was able to go back and meet up with Ernie again. And then my wife actually works for a large company in San Antonio, and she goes there once a quarter, so she meets up with Ernie and his wife. So yeah, an awesome friendship started from it. And then back in May of 25, it went from friendship to having to work well with each other to author a book. So you never know what can happen when you meet some people.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Ernie, the first time you meet Scott, you cannot not like him. He's just the most friendliest guy, and you go, you're in the Marines and all this hardcore stuff. You're a cop, and he's just he's just the nicest person. So this is the first time I've met Ernie today, but you both have great personalities. I'm sure these speaking engagements that you go to, people are gravitate towards you in the way you speak and stuff like that. What kind of speaking engagements do you guys work together on those, or do you just meet up at times?
Not yet. We haven't met at the same event yet, but who knows what could happen.
Yeah, cool. Well, very good.
Yeah,
I want to get
Scott got a pretty cool speaking gig here, training a very large company on de-escalation and crisis intervention. I was out of town, had another opportunity to go speak somewhere, and I asked Scott, "Hey, would you be interested in this?" Now, what I didn't tell him was how hot it gets here in August. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do it." So he comes down here, and I think I'm in Florida where he lives now, and I'm FaceTiming him, and it's like 75 degrees. I'm like, man, it's beautiful. Scott, how you doing? He's like, brother, I am melting. Like, this is horrible.
I had one experience. I've only been to Florida once. That was in the early, it was maybe 80, something like 83. And I had arrested, my partner and I arrested a gal, a very young gal. She was out of Florida, and she had an burglary with an armed burglary warrant out of Florida. And so I go, I'll talk to you and whatever. And so she told me something. And then we booked her, and I guess they flew her back to Florida and all that. And then I got subpoenaed to go to Florida. So we got to spend some time in Florida and drove around. I had some days off, and I parlayed those into it. But one thing about Florida is we got off the plane in the airport. This is nice. The airport's all air conditioned. When the doors open, the humidity just sucked the moisture out of my skin. It was so bad. It was horrible.
And you haven't been back since?
I haven't been back since 1983. I was traumatized. Well, let's talk about this book, because I perused this book. Scott was kind enough to send me a copy. 101 questions to ask. That is interesting. 101 questions to ask before becoming a law enforcement officer. And the chapters got me, because the chapters are chapter 1, the pathway to law enforcement, 2, understanding the role and responsibilities, and going down to the chapters. These are some great sounding chapters that in the Police Applicant podcast, we talk about all the stuff about hiring and backgrounds and things to look out for. But the depth of this book, and I'm encouraging everybody that's listening to this and on the YouTube video to get a copy of this book. It looks like a very good. It's a workbook. It makes you think. They're not just pouring information into you. They're also asking you questions about it. So how did this book come about?
Well, it's all Ernie's fault, so I'll let him start with that.
Well, I was on a walk, and that's when I do my best thinking. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about a book about starting a business. And it was like, man, if they only wrote a book about everything, like 101 questions you should ask before starting a business, and that would have really helped me get going and make sure, that I knew what I was doing. I was on the right track. And Scott had just released several books titled 101 whatevers, right? Mythbusters. I mean, he's written them all. And I'm like, wow, well, what about 101 questions to ask before choosing a career in law enforcement? Because I know me, if I could go back, I'd have asked a lot more questions, because at 21 years old, or really at 20 and a half, when I joined the police academy, I was looking for a job, but not truly knowing what I was applying for or what the expectations truly were going to be. And looking at this, as we wrote this, it's really a career development book, because we write it all the way through retirement. And if I'd have known some of the answers to the questions we ask in this book, it would have set me up for success and a lot less stress on the job.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I feel like I'm a tad younger than both of you guys. I'm a tad older than both of you guys. But I think I started applying maybe in 1979, and there were no cell phones, there were no answer machines, there was no email, there was no websites, there was nothing. And so, if you weren't at your home or at a business where there was a phone where you could get a phone call, you did not get a message. There was no messages. And so there's no excuse in 2026 for candidates not to find the information that's out there. And I really feel that this book is going to go into a lot of people's arsenals to help them before they get hired. And one thing I like about this podcast is that we don't sugarcoat things. And I think that you guys dealing in mental health, I really think it's a good idea for people to know what they're getting into. And this is what this book is about. So tell me about some of these chapters and how the book lays out, and how the candidates can use this book to better themselves as candidates.
Well, it starts out like, why do you want to get into it? And what can you do to prepare for it? And it goes into in-depth questions you can ask someone you deem credible, or do your research. But we structure it in a way where this isn't just a bunch of information that we provide. Yes, we give like a intro to the chapter and a reflection at the end of the chapter, but the questions are there so you can write down answers that you find, because several studies have shown when people write things down, they're more likely to remember them. And so it starts out like, like I said, why do you want to do it? Well, why are you getting into this? What can you do to prepare? But then it's career sustainability and setting you up for to prevail in the profession. It really is. And questions such as, can I rely just on the police department to train me? But we're not going to answer it for you. That's up to you to find out. And then we do go into like ethics and the legality, like questions about that. But then, just like you said, Ken, mental health, because let's face it, someone can be very smart, know all the laws, all the case law, stuff like that. But if they're not mentally sound, then you're acting in a state of negative emotions, which can definitely override logic, and you become a liability. So there are questions about how can you take care of yourself? How can you withstand the inevitable stress, demands, and trauma you will face? And then just like Ernie said, it goes all the way through career into retirement, because yeah, who in their 20s is thinking about retirement? But then all of a sudden you hear the older cops talk about this. Time goes by fast. And then you're 10, 15 years into it and you're like, oh shoot, time does go by really fast. And you got to prepare for it financially and mentally, and preparing for the next opportunity. So that's kind of how it's set up. We just wanted the person to read, but also dig deep and write down answers that they find out. And then during the career, you can ask these questions again as a way to reflect and maybe refocus and recalibrate and keep marching forward.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Retirement is something that young people who are applying don't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
And they also don't think about the trauma that you go through on the job, because you go through the academy and that's academic and it's role playing and things like that. And you may do PT and you may do some scenarios and things like that and shoot and all that kind of stuff. But that's just the surface of it. Mm-hmm. When you get in the field, that's when the rubber meets the road. And does this book you said that it's good that the people who read it write down these things. And there's a lot of workspace for people to write, what they're thinking down as far as the previous chapter goes. How does the book help them in their thought process and mentally think about things that they've never thought about when applying?
I think it does, because the questions we selected for the individual chapters, and there's 10 chapters in the book, and each chapter has 10 questions, and then at the end we throw in that bonus question to give you 101. And the questions we selected really were questions that I can reflect back now 30 years and say, I would have asked that question had I known, and I've been able to prepare better, right? And it's, from the very beginning, first chapter, the pathway to law enforcement. If you'd have asked me, what's the difference between what the sheriff's department does and a police department, I might have been able to give you a high overview, but I couldn't give you a detailed answer. What about if you want to go into corrections? What's the difference between probation and parole? What about federal law enforcement? What about state park rangers? What about metropolitan transit police, or, school resource officers? Like you need to think very carefully about what you want to choose in this lifetime to serve, because this is not a job. It is a career, and it's something that's going to carry you and your family until retirement in most cases. Right. So the more you're informed early on, the better choices I think that you have when you're informed of, okay, this sounds more in line with what I want to do. What's the difference between an agency that has a metro like Las Vegas, where the police and the sheriff's department, they're put together, it's a metro, they get paid the same, versus, a county sheriff's department and a city municipality, who's in Los Angeles, right? I understand the sheriff's department's really big and robust, and LAPD, as famous as they are, is a little bit more condensed to the city. We're in San Antonio, we're a lot larger department on the police department, on the municipality side of it, and the sheriff's department more has the responsibility of the jail and then serving civil commitments along with some small patrol duties. Mm-hmm. So these are like, you really need to know what you're doing before you just start throwing applications out there.
Yeah. And can you guys go into a little bit, you mentioned career versus job, and can you guys go into a little bit the difference between the two? Because I think a lot of the young people today, they go, I'm going to get a job as a cop. And I don't think they fully understand that a career is all encompassing. I mean, they could take you into the years on the job, to retirement, to everything that has meaning in your life stems from having a career as opposed to a job. And so can you guys go into the differences so people understand what we're talking about?
Scott, you want to start? You want me to jump in?
Oh, yeah, no, sure. When I hear job, I just think I need something that helps me pay my bills. But when you hear career, it's like something I can really become invested in and grow and find the next opportunity in and advance and continuously get better at, which law enforcement, I mean, that's a job where you're never going to know it all. You know that continuous training has to happen. And we dive into that in the book, like what kind of training can I take and how can I set myself up better? But once again, it's a question you have to ask, an answer you have to find out. And but career, it's definitely way more than a job.
Yeah, and when you look at a career versus, quote unquote, and I'll throw up air quotes, a job, look at the benefits. You have to look at your benefits package. If you're, and I'm not making light of any job at all, I'm just picking one out of the air. Let's say you're a barista at Starbucks. Are they going to offer you, language pay, nighttime differential? Are they going to give you extra if you're a crisis intervention trained officer? Is there going to be a paid for healthcare plan for you when you retire, because you're paying into it while you're working through this career path, and after 30 years you're vested, and now you have healthcare for life for free? Like, these are the differences. You've got to really look at, what are my benefits packages here? You got to understand, you're not always guaranteed a raise, but a lot of times you have collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a huge deal if you're a law enforcement officer. This is where you get to bargain with, your city council as to what you need or what you're desiring for benefits. And if you can't come to an agreement, then the community gets to come in and do a vote on this. And this is important. This helps the police department, because I worked for a collective bargaining agency. You want to stay in good standing with this community at all time. One, it's the right thing to do, but two, you're going to need their support. Okay. Whether it's on a call, maybe them being a good witness, all the way to, I need you to go to the polls and vote for this proposition and help us, get some items that we need as we move into a new fiscal year. Those are the differences. And I think that's important to understand.
Big time.
Do you agree, Scott?
Just slightly. Yes. No, 100%. Yeah.
Now, your book, looks like there are 10 chapters. Mm-hmm. And when you wrote the book, did you already have a game plan that was going to be 10 chapters? Or as you wrote it, you go, oh man, we should include this too? Did you?
It was hard to narrow down to 101. It could have been 301 questions, but we what we did was we broke up different subjects, which a subject is a chapter, and then, like, Ernie took some, I took some, but then we put it on a Google shared document, and we evaluated each question and said, this goes, this stays, because we each came up with like 15 to 20 sometimes for each chapter. And it was like, we need to narrow this down, and that's how we kind of structured it and came about with the 101 questions.
We use preemptive strikes, right? We'll just talk like we're in court. Because, think about it. Here's the easy question. Do I wear Oakley boots or high tech? You could have asked 100 questions and ask the officers that are walking around in the boots, what's a better boot? But we really tried to stick to the foundation of what law enforcement officers or prospective law enforcement officers need to know when choosing this career path.
Yeah, there's so many chapters in here that I wanted to ask you about, and one of them that stood out to me was legal and ethical considerations. I've never even thought about that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I remember one of the questions is, how well should I understand the laws? And it's if you ask any credible person within law enforcement, we're like, that's basically everything. Like, I remember I interviewed a police chief for my YouTube channel, and I said, what's your advice to rookie police officers? He said, first thing, it's not the technical stuff. Know your case laws. And so, it's like Ernie said, it's the basic stuff, but it's very important. So there's questions in there for you to ask and find out the information about.
Yeah. Part of that chapter is, understanding courtroom testimony. And, I don't know how much time you spent in trial, but that is where you really need to be on your game, because you're going up against usually a very seasoned attorney, and they know what questions they're going to ask. and you're you're nervous, it's a different setting. And when I was on DWI, I got beat up a lot by defense attorneys until I learned, okay, they're asking me the same questions, and these are all relevant to the stop. So if I just drilled, they actually helped me become a better DWI officer, because as I would get ready to pull a vehicle over, I'm like, okay, they're going to ask me, like, what was my probable cause for this stop, right? Then they're going to ask me, what did I notice upon my approach to the vehicle? So by them asking me these questions, it helped prepare me on the traffic stop to write a good report, to have good courtroom testimony. So there's just little tricks of the trade like that in there.
Yeah, I think that people nowadays would have very little excuses because when the three of us were in the field, there, you basically, well, I can speak for myself. I don't know about you guys, but we would arrest people for the same things over and over again. And so knowing the elements of the laws for those specific shoplifting, robbery, stolen vehicle, assault, battery, ADW, things like that, we did it over and over again. So it wasn't difficult to know.
Right.
That was an assault with a deadly weapon.
Yeah, exactly. I always say, if you're a cop in a busy district, you practice arrest, search, and seizure so much that it's just second nature. And but it's one of those things where we got to stay on top of it. Just so you go to firearms once a year, and obviously you're expected to train a heck of a lot in between. It's no different with the legal knowledge, but also standing up for what's right, what's wrong, and admitting when you make a mistake. Bottom line.
Yeah, and I think that nowadays everything's on your cell phone. Mm-hmm. There's Westlaw, and there's penal codes, and there's everything you could. There's nothing on this earth that you cannot possibly look up. Is that a crime? I feel like it's a crime. Well, let me pull up my cell phone.
Yeah, exactly.
And Google it. There's everything from city municipal codes to state penal code sections, and so it's important to know the laws, and especially now with the a lot of civil rights stuff, knowing the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment. You can't, you have to know this stuff when and you know what, you guys can school me on this stuff, like stopping somebody. What are the three prongs of probable cause or whatever it is? There's no reason why people should not take your advice and know what the law says in this.
Yes. Yeah, you hit on something, right? With the phones, there's a chapter in there, chapter 9, navigating the digital shift. It's all about evolving technology, because just like you said, when I found an individual that was in possession with some, let's say, some types of medication, I had to call poison control. All right, poison control. Describe the pill. Oh, it's white. It's got 6 sides. It's got a letter C in the middle. Okay, that's Klonopin or whatever it was. Okay, what is that schedule? That's a Schedule 3 felony. Okay, thank you. And you hang up. And that's how we used to identify what medications we found. We didn't have a smartphone that we could take a picture and say, identify this pill, right? So even just the shift in technology and what officers have available to them has changed the blueprint of policing as we know it today.
Yep. Yeah, I think that you hit on something. I use AI at times. I use Copilot and Gemini from Google and all that, and you can literally throw a photo in there. I was looking for a part for a platform bed. It was electric, and there was one of the parts had seemed like it had gone out. So I took a photo of the actual part, had the product information. I sent it to the AI, the Copilot. I said, what is this? Oh, that's this, that, and this part, and like that. And you can get it here. I'm going, holy cow. And so there's no reason why, like a pill or drugs or things like that, just throw the picture in there with the code on whatever tablet it is, and you should be able to get it. So.
Well, I think also it's great that officers on downtime, say late at night, and it's maybe slowed down, particularly on a cold night or a rainy shift, and it's not as bad. Like, you literally have training that you can implement for yourself in your car. Just go to YouTube, different police training channels, and you can get your own in-service training by watching channels. I mean, because you have that ability to take advantage of the technology out there.
Yeah. And I want to ask you guys your opinions on this. And Ernie, when did you retire?
January 1st, 2021.
Congratulations.
Counting, right?
And Scott, when did you retire or you left the department?
I left the profession full-time August of 2020, and then left it entirely in spring of 22.
Okay. So you guys were in the thick of it with this a lot of the technology that's going on. What is your opinion on a lot of the AI stuff that's going on in police work? Good, bad, not a thought?
Yeah, I mean, I look at, I visit now that I work for a national organization, and I look at real-time information centers, and I go and I visit, and I look at these centers, and it's just mind-blowing what AI and face recognition, shot spotter, all the different, new toys that they're all playing with. And if you look at some of the companies that run either body cam, I mean, they have the AI technology in there to even write the reports for you now. Right. It just transcribes, right, what you see on body cam. So I wish that would have been available when I was still working. But, at the same time, you can't become too reliant upon technology. I was eating dinner with a sheriff from Boulder, Colorado the other night, and he said, wow, these new recruits, like one of the things we have to teach them is how to talk to people. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, there's a scenario, no kidding, where we just send them in a room and I'm standing there and they have to spark up a conversation and speak with me for 5 minutes. And I can walk them right into a corner talking to them and they can't finish a sentence. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, they grew up on cell phones and not truly knowing how to emote or use their emotions and I was just awestruck by when he said this, but it makes sense. Because I look at my own daughter, who's 20 years old, and if that phone's not in her hand, something's going on. I need to find out why she's not feeling well.
Yeah. And Scott, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there is a question in there about how can I use technology to help within the profession, like make it better. So I know there's ways, but I have plenty of friends that are still in it, and they are now. And these are guys I went to rookie school with. They are now supervisors and the upper ranks of the police department, and they're telling me how some officers are basically sending in narratives where you can tell it's AI, or you can tell they got lazy with it because it was auto-generated, and they just send it through and they're like, read this again and send it back after you've done some actual work with it. So another friend of mine at a mid-size agency, he said that just what Ernie brought up, how it will type up a report, but they do have to put their name on it. Like, so then in court, they can say, well, I didn't know it said that. Well, you signed off on it. I mean, this is a really crazy advanced technology, but I do echo what Ernie said in that what I noticed towards the end of my career was that there were officers who would hit me up with messages after messages and carry on conversations, or at least try to, on the laptop, like the messaging, but you get face to face with them and they wouldn't say anything. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's this dynamic here? And I think one thing's not going to change about policing is you have to interact with people, and you have to be good with communication with people, and ever evolving in that. And we do have a chapter on that about how to maximize it, but we don't want technology to get to a point where we're losing our ability to connect with people.
No, you can't have everything run by robots. And when you can't rely on these reports, because when I open up Copilot, I could throw a sentence in there, and within seconds, they've scoured the entire internet and given me all this information. It's like that. But there's also a disclaimer when I open it up. It says AI makes mistakes.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you go into court and you don't put your own spin and your own thoughts and you go into court and you testify about that could be problematic if it's incorrect.
Oh yeah.
And something you brought up earlier, Ken, you said, when we do a lot of these, thefts, shoplifting, and you get good at it, you get used to it, what the elements of the offense are. Well, that was the same way in DWI. I could tell you what the probable cause was. I could sit there and tell you what all the field sobriety testing was. But if every report sounded the same, that was a problem. All right. You go to court and they're like, well, officer, here's your last 3 arrests. and you're using this same word, saying that this happened at the same time, that when you walked up to the window, as they spoke, you had to turn away to get fresh air because their breath was overwhelmingly strong with alcoholic beverages. And you said that 3 times on 3 stops. So be professional. Each encounter that you have with somebody is very unique, and it should be unique. But again, don't be relying upon AI or previous, stops, or you just kind of regurgitating the same information.
Yeah, one of the other things is that the difference between the AI and the recollection of the officer. There was an article, I'm going to say about maybe a little over 2 years ago. The LA Times put an article out. There's this company that's the big camera company. Is it
Axon? Yeah, Axon. Yeah, I think so.
They had a proposal because there's tens of thousands of video of officers encounters and traffic stops and things like that in the city of Los Angeles, and they had a proposal from the company that the AI would go through all these thousands and thousands of hours and search for tone of voice for the officer. And if your camera footage or the audio doesn't match your report because AI said something and it red flags it. So these are things that I think it's important. This is chapter 9, navigating the digital shift, in that it's very important that candidates understand what you're saying about being in touch with the digital frontier that's out in front of us.
Yeah, and what you mentioned, I think, is important, because I can tell you this: my supervisor, my sergeant, they were required to watch 2 hours of body cam footage per officer per week. They just don't have the time to do it. There's no way, right? If they've got 25 officers under their district or in their district, to try to watch 50 hours of body cam footage in a week while they're making, worksheets and in-service schedules and going to officer complaints and accidents and major crime scenes, they just can't do it. So in a way, that kind of technology can be adaptive to help streamline, to try to find, hey, search for when this officer raises his voice using curse words, or there sounds to be a struggle, or whatever the key words you want to put in for the AI. But it could help, streamline some of the process of these policies and procedures that just aren't realistic. And it's just too much work for a field sergeant to have to do, to be expected to do, when they truly want to be out in the field, with their officers.
Yeah, that's crazy. And having to do that 50 hours a week, and then having to actually go out and supervise the officers if they need something, I don't think that's possible. I think
there's a 40-hour work week. 50 hours of video, do the math.
On your in your chapters, do each of you have any chapters that are near and dear to you, that are special, that you really this really spoke to you, this particular chapter?
Yeah, there was. I mean, that was part of our strategy of breaking it up. Ernie made it to retirement in his career, so I said, well, you take the retirement chapter and stuff like that. It was just, we each had one where we knew we could write a little bit more based on the career path that we took, and that was also, just like I said, part of the strategy for writing it. But for both of us, the mental health portion is huge, because one, you're going to be interacting with people sometimes when they're at their worst in crisis, but you're not immune to it. And my gosh, I wish someone would have told me that in the very beginning, that you're going to see things that your brain, that the innate wiring of your brain, it never desires you to see what you're going to be exposed to. And you have got to learn how to navigate through it. And it's more than just have friends outside of the profession, or what are some other golden rules? Have a hobby outside of the profession. I'm not knocking those things, but if those things were working so well, we wouldn't have the statistics we are nowadays. It's just, you got to know who you can reach out to. And that's a question, like, who can I reach out for help? Because you've got to know that going into it. And because if you are having a hard time moving past something that you were exposed to, whether inside the 4 walls or out there in the public, you got to know who you can reach out to. So yeah, there were definitely different chapters that hit home for each of us, but one that was mutual was the mental health one.
Yeah, I'll agree with Scott. In my time in the department, we had 15 officers die by suicide, and I responded to 7 of those myself when I was on the mental health unit. We had 3 in a 16-month period while I was on mental health that I responded to all 3 of those. And, it's just, it touches you differently when you see an officer in uniform that has died by suicide. You try to make sense of it, which you can't. It's affecting their coworkers. The family's going to get inundated with help, but then what? 6 months later, right? So Scott's right. This chapter was near and dear to our heart. We want you to be prepared when those dark days come, because they're going to come. We want you to be prepared to have a plan in place to help you to get through those times. Again, they're going to be there. My mistake in my career was I waited until after I retired, and then I finally had time to process. Because when you're working the streets and you're going from call to call to call, and you're sign up and you're working overtime and overtime, you really don't get a break to process. If you handle a homicide or a fatality accident, as soon as you're done with that, you click your 10-8 button, you get back in service, and you're off to the next call.
Right.
There's no, where's the decompression room? That doesn't exist for law enforcement. For some places it does. I know that, not to knock firemen, but they got a great critical incident stress management where some can shut down an entire firehouse and deal with that and have that stress management, critical incident stress management debriefing. For law enforcement, it's not like that. And when I retired, I remember I was on a camping trip and just got overwhelmed with emotion. My wife was like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Man, it's all hit me. Like it's flooding me all of a sudden," because I finally had time to process it. So know that going into this career, there's going to be, what do they say, Scott? I don't know, 800 traumatic incidents. I've heard all kind of numbers.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you spend several years on the profession, you'll experience hundreds, and the average person experiences like what they can count on one hand.
Yeah. So it's kind of, in a way, Ken, it's a survival guide. It's a survival guide for your retirement and your financial planning. It's a retirement guide for your mental health. It's a guide to help you with your career pathways, because sometimes officers say, "Hey, I want to now move to a federal agency." Well, what does that career pathway look like? So we try to cover all of that in there.
I want to get into the mental health part a little bit more, but I want to kind of set up this question with this in chapter. Let me see. Where was it? Chapter in public interaction. I'm on YouTube a lot, and send me a lot of videos of police officers, and by and large, there are some where people are doing things, and the cops take action and they arrest the person. But more often than not, and especially with young children or young people, high school students, just people that think they can get in officers' faces, they can continually harass them, they can assault them, and all these things. When I was on the job, that didn't happen. Nowadays, it's like every day, it's somebody gave a permission slip to harass and assault police officers. And so there is this question in my mind, is when does it cross a line? If it happens 10 times, if it happens 100 times, if you're since 2020, where there's countless protests that turn violent. Every time there's an incident, the cops are called out across the nation. They get rocks thrown at them and things, and they know after you've done this a few times, it has to affect you mentally. And then when you talk to people, and it can be as simple as you just showing up to a call, and somebody's in your face and they're bad mouthing you and they're talking to you and they're right up, and it just becomes an emotional thing. How should police applicants prepare themselves for this scenario? And then also for you guys, what's the mental health toll having to do this week after week, year after year?
Yeah. You know, when I was on the mental health unit, my last 15 years with San Antonio was on the mental health unit. So every single call I went to was mental health related. Many of those were completed suicides. It does wear on you. It does take a toll. I worked the protests for George Floyd. I worked undercover in our downtown area in Travis Park. I had an FBI agent assigned with me, and we were monitoring the crowd and relaying back to our intelligence center the movements. And yeah, they were yelling, they were screaming, but they were yelling and screaming at the uniform officers. You know, I'm standing in there with the protests, you know, watching these officers having to endure this, thinking, man, how long do they have to stand there and take this abuse? And my answer is, you have to take it in this job. You have to take it. You have to remain professional. You have to understand the essence of what procedural justice means when you get into this job. And we cover that in this book. Procedural justice, there's two parts to it. There's legitimate authority and there's statutory authority. Legitimate authority is that authority in which the community gives you to do your job. That means you've got a good relationship with them. You haven't forsaken their trust. And they allow you to do your job until they don't. And when you have these protests, then you have statutory authority. That's where you have to begin to introduce laws to make arrests, to remove these protesters or those that are causing these kind of problems. And you don't want to have to rely on statutory authority, because that's where it seems like police come in and they're heavy-handed, when in fact, you've no longer given them the authority to do their job. And it's a gift, right? They give us the authority, but what we do with it is our gift back to the community. And I think that's important to understand. So you have to remain professional, but understand it's going to wear and tear you. And that's what's so important. What Scott said earlier is use this book as a reflection. After you've gone through something like that, go back to the beginning. Why did I choose this profession? And remember your why, I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'd like to say is, when those tense times hit, there is a question about how do I remain calm, or how do I compose myself in a tense situation? Some of the best advice, I'll go ahead and give an answer. Some of the best advice I got was, you can't lose perspective that when people, whether it be on a traffic stop or any other situation, someone acts out, chances are they don't know you. It's not you. It's not about you. It's about that uniform you're wearing. And if you take it about you, that's when it becomes personal and your negative emotions start to fester. And then you're more at risk of acting out of those negative emotions. And then we have a whole situation on our hands. When I shifted the perspective to it, they're not yelling at me personally. It's the uniform. But then I knew what I stood for and who I was as a person and why I was in this, especially in 2014 when it was hands up, don't shoot. We know that was a lie, but they would still yell this. And it didn't matter who it was, but I didn't let it get to me, because they were obviously hurt from an incident, from learning about it. But then it was just the uniform I was wearing. So it didn't really bother me. I was going to do my job either way, but I was going to be professional. I was going to be empathetic. And you can do those things as long as you realize it's not about you as a person. You really can put yourself at risk when you start to take things personal on the job. Now, I'm not saying don't ever get upset. Of course, it's going to wear on you, but that's when actual stress management and having purpose and the right mentality of proceeding forward. That's and when needed, ask for help. It's crucial. Nobody's immune to this, and the good thing is you don't have to go through that all on your own. You have your immediate officers, you have your family at home, you have resources that are available. But once again, these questions that'll help you find the answers and do your own research for that. So that's my take on what's going on nowadays with navigating that adversity.
Well, I get the part where it's not personal, because they don't know you from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But when the rocks and bottles start flying and they hit you, or people are attacking you, how do officers that are on the job now how do they respond to that and not let it fester?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, the first thing is, I found whenever people were straight up combative and trying to hurt me, whether to get away or hurt me out of like just pure anger. Once again, I know they didn't know me, but the more training, the better. Like I took it upon myself to train jujitsu all throughout my career, and it made it safer for me and the suspect or suspects when it came time to use force. And therefore, I was able to keep my composure a heck of a lot better than the officer, more times than not, who was next to me, had no idea how to defend themselves other than what was taught years ago at a police academy for only a week-long training. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the tools on the belt don't work, and you got to know what to do. So I say fall back on your training at that point. But like I said, I mean, I'm not saying don't get upset about it. It's stressful. It's very stressful. But there's the mind is a strong thing, and if you don't train it, it will use you and abuse you, and it won't help you set you up for success if it's untrained for a career like law enforcement. So training's crucial.
Yeah, Scott, I'll also double down on that. I agree, training is crucial because there's going to be protocols and how you respond to somebody when they start throwing bottles. I was in the mix of all that during the protest, and as I was one of the protesters, I was getting shot at with pepper balls by our SWAT team, right? So I was seeing how they responded, and I don't want to have a part of that. I want you to keep in mind this. When those things happen, and they can and they will, please remember that is such a small percentage of society. That does not represent your community that loves and supports you. Deal with it in the moment, process it, but remember, you've got a community that depends on you. If ever they have to pick up that phone and call 911, they need you in a good headspace. They don't need you mad because you were dealing with a riot last night. Now, is that fair for the officer that they got to go from dealing with a riot now to responding to somebody's house and taking a missing person report on their 12-year-old daughter and showing up really with apathy and like, really? It's not fair. But it's where we have to remain professional and remember who we're serving.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another aspect of what Ernie had said earlier. And this is probably a loaded question, and I understand that before I ask it. Why is it a pattern that so many officers commit suicide?
It's human problems. I'd like to cite Dr. Olivia Johnson. She came up with the fatal 10, and I mean it's anywhere from relationships to on down. And basically, when we don't address these human problems within the profession, they can add up. And particularly when it comes to relationships, that's huge. If someone feels like they're on their own, there's no other way to escape pain. We're at risk, and that's how it can happen. I mean, I'm not speaking for every case. But when that is brought up, I have to mention the fatal. Like you can Google it and that'll come up. But mainly the main thing is like these are humans going through human problems, and unfortunately, when you're in a stressful career like that and you don't feel supported, whether at home and or at work, it's dangerous territory.
Yeah, Scott, I love that you quoted her. I'll ask your listeners to go look up the Asher model. It was Chief Neil Gang out of Pinole, California, that came up with the Asher model, named after Officer Asher Rosinski, who died by suicide. And that really puts a lot of responsibility on the organization. Has the organization built a culture of wellness to provide the help and resources that an officer and their family needs when they have a serious moment? And I think that's important because you could check a box and say, well, we have an assistance, an EAP program. Okay, well, that's good. But do you have a really good, robust peer support program? Mm-hmm. Do you provide an environment where it's okay for me not to be okay and I feel safe reaching or asking for help? Do you provide mindfulness opportunities for me? For your nighttime officers, do you have access to good, nutritious food for them to eat instead of, the drive-through food that's only available at night? There's all there's different pillars under the Asher model. There's 7 of them. And, if your organization truly does support you, they support you from recruitment to retirement. Because let's talk about recruiting for just a minute, Ken. Go look at any recruitment pamphlet, right? What are you going to see in there? I don't know. A SWAT team, a helicopter, a dog team, bicycle police, all the sexy, right? You're going to see that in the recruiting pamphlet. But what do they never show you? They never show you an arm around another officer saying, man, I'm sorry you had to deal with that, but we're going to get through this together. Because that's the reality of this job. That's the reality of the job. The sexy is 1%. If you get on the SWAT team, good for you. But the reality is you're going to deal with trauma every single day, which is going to create trauma to you. And I hope your listeners understand this. Trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. And I think
it's not
if you understand that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's not a character flaw if you're battling post-traumatic stress symptoms. It's not a character flaw. It's your nervous system. So I'm so glad Ernie said that.
There's 2 comments that I see when somebody hears like an officer committed suicide. There's 2 comments. One is they took the coward's way out, and the other one is, I guess they just didn't see a way of escape. And
well, there are people that feel like there's no other way out of the pain, and they're desperate for that. But I have spoken to several officers who survived their own suicide attempts. Every single one of them was scared when they were trying to go through with it. So I don't take the whole it's the coward's way out. They were scared, but they stayed alive. I don't buy into that one.
Yeah, I talked to Kevin Hines. He's the gentleman that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and then lived to tell about it. And, he said something to me very, very profound. He said, I had no hesitation in what I wanted to do. I no longer wanted to live. I was in a horrible place. I felt helpless. I climbed up on the bridge and I jumped. But the second I let go, I wish I didn't. I wish I didn't. And I think that goes back to what Scott's saying. So for anybody who's on the fence right now that's listening, just remember that. They wish they didn't. Take a moment, reflect, and ask for help. It's available.
Yeah. And I've been studying a lot over the last 5 years about how our brain is, and particularly when it comes to our thoughts. And one of the most liberating things I read was, and it's true, just because you have a thought, it doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean you have to believe it. So when it comes to those dark thoughts, you can dismiss them. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but you can dismiss them. So don't feed them. It's the hopeful, ambitious, faithful, all those positive, strong thoughts that you have. Water those, and we just kill off those weeds day in and day out, because those negative thoughts are going to be there. And suicide ideation, it happens to many officers. And then unfortunately, yes, it can lead to being more suicidal, but you don't have to believe the thoughts at all. There's hope, and life is worth living every single day, even when you're going through hard times.
Are police departments, are they providing the care that officers really need, or are some departments just behind?
I think we've come a long way, particularly since 2019, but we definitely have a long way to go, because I'll be honest, I've seen it there, and others in the same kind of space have said the same thing. There are some where it's, well, we got this established, check. It's like, no, there's way more to it than that.
Yeah, but when you look at a lot of these conferences, and I travel and I go to quite a few of them, whether it's International Association of Chiefs of Police, CIT International, National Sheriffs, Major Chiefs, there are always breakout sessions. In fact, in a couple of weeks in St. Augustine, there's the parks police, all the state park police and national forest rangers are getting together, and the entire conference is scheduled around wellness and resiliency. You're seeing more and more of these breakout sessions about wellness and resiliency. You're seeing departments start to build trauma-informed care wellness teams, which is a totally separate unit from a mental health unit. This is all just for within the walls and the confines of law enforcement. So, like Scott said, we've come a long way. Are we there yet? No. Of course, we'll never be there until we have a 0 suicide year. And even at that, you can't measure 0 as a success point because there's still officers struggling.
Right. Are there any differences between male and females as far as the stats go about, I know it's a male-dominated profession, but do you see that the commonalities are just the same mentally, how they address things mentally, or is it's the same?
I don't know the statistics in and of themselves, but I do wonder, would women be more willing to ask for help than a man? It's just thoughts like that come to mind. But as of the latest stats, when it comes to suicide, because as of the last few years, I've been speaking more about mindset and veered away from the actual suicide statistics. But don't get me wrong, it's still very alarming. I mean, it was only a few months ago I saw on LinkedIn that a female officer had died by suicide, and then not too much longer after that, a male officer had died by suicide. So, I mean, nobody's immune.
Yeah. We did an episode a few episodes ago, and it was titled "The Dangerous Dance Between Police Officers and Alcohol." And I did some research on it, and I was kind of surprised to find out that the statistics show that women officers are more prone to alcoholism or drinking than men.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which I thought, that's interesting, because you don't really, whenever you think about officer suicide and mental health issues and things like that, you, by and large, you go, oh, men.
Yeah, if you go, I was just trying to check these numbers real quick. If you go to bluehelp.org and go to by the numbers, you'll see they break it down. They break it down by profession. They break it down by active and by retired. But there's a lot of good information in there. Not only is there information, there's resources available on that website too as well. So it talks, there's such a high prevalence of suicide within corrections.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When you look at the number of correction officers versus, a large police department, the numbers just are skyrocketing for corrections. But you have to look at the environment in which they're working in all day as well. And then what is that agency doing, to provide health and wellness for them? So yeah, tough. We'll be battling this, for a lot of years. And I don't know if we'll ever have the answers, but I think the more that we normalize the conversation, and I appreciate you using this platform to address this issue, because a lot of people don't want to talk about this. It's taboo. If we normalize it and talk about it, I think that's how we begin to recover loudly, so we don't die silently.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that comes to mind, and then I want to ask you about that, and then I want to ask you a closing question. Before I mentioned that on the screen for the YouTube, people watching on YouTube, there's a link with a QR code for the book, 101 Questions to Ask Before Becoming a Law Enforcement Officer. Just click on it, take a picture of the QR code. And for those who listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'll put the link to the book in the show notes, so you'll be able to go directly to that. My question before my last question is, can you guys address that you are not the job. The job is not you. You cannot, you cannot say, oh, I'm not a cop anymore, so my life is over. I just got no, with regard to life and things like that. Can you guys address that it's a job, it's a career, but it's a job that doesn't define you? Can you address that a little bit?
I got hit with this the hardest back in, 10 years ago almost, when I had to resign from K-9 basically for the sake of my marriage. And for so long, those 3 years I was on the unit, I would meet people and they'd say, what do you do? I would say, I am a K-9 officer. And those two words, I am, are very powerful. where looking back, I should have told people I work as a police canine officer. See, it's language has meaning, and language determines your beliefs and how you feel and the way you can shape your mentality. And I really thought that was it. I felt like I was answering God's calling, and this is what I was meant to do. And then when I wasn't doing it anymore, I felt lost. And for a year, I battled resentment. And like I said, I was lost. I didn't feel like there was a sense of purpose. But then I started. This is that emotional low I was talking about later on in my career, and I started learning about how we are as human beings. Who you are is really what matters. It's way more important than what you do, because who you are, you can take in other fields, not just law enforcement. Now, I believe deep down that a lot of people that get into law enforcement are answering something that is obviously way beyond themselves, and they will respond without hesitation to help strangers when 911 is called. You can help complete strangers and still be of service in other ways. Is it going to be a heck of a lot different? Yes. But take it from me, someone who had to leave the profession for the sake of my family because it just wasn't working out anymore. I miss the profession each and every day. I'm only 42 years old. I still had many more years to go. But I'm opening up a franchise store in the next few weeks. I'm going to be seeing people coming in and having fun, and I'm providing that service to them. And then they'll leave feeling sometimes better than when they walked in. Yeah, it's not as exciting as chasing down a larceny suspect who just robbed or stole from 5 other Walmarts across the state, and you finally get the chance to catch them. But you can still serve because of who you are. So don't lose sight of who you are, and then carry that on after the profession, because it's not who you are. It's way more than it's not your identity.
Amen.
Yeah, Scott, I'll agree. I mean, you can love this job all you want. This is not a cynical answer. This is a true statement. Like, you can love this job with all your heart, but this job will never love you back as much as you love it. Okay, please understand that. And what's interesting is when I went to a retirement gathering where officers were given their retirement plaque and got to say a few words, you know what I kept hearing was the theme? Well, I survived. If that's what you think you did in law enforcement after a career, I'm asking you to raise the bar. You did more than survive. You made a difference. You left a footprint. You added value. You added a benefit to your community and your organization. You need to see yourself like that, not just that you survived. And, I think in law enforcement, it's such a noble profession, but we just don't raise the bar to where it needs to be, as you approach the ending of a career.
Yeah, and I
Ken, may I add one thing?
Yeah.
Okay, this kind of ties in with identity, in the sense of who you are. Who you are, you need to be there for your family at home. And maybe someone listening is very young; they don't have a family of their own yet. But I hope one day you do. And if you do, then please understand that family is the one that'll be there for you when the job is gone. The department will not. So please. I'm all for a department having a family-like culture, but no officer should go through and say the department is my family. I disagree with that, just because you won't hear from the department like you did when you worked there. Your family back at home means a lot, but that also kind of ties into the identity thing as well.
I remember when I was very young, had about maybe 3 years on the job, and one of my sergeants, he became a good friend later on, but he sat me down. He goes, "Hey, the P3, the training officer test is coming up, and you should really think about promoting." I go, I don't feel like promoting. I don't feel like I want to promote right now. He goes, "Oh, why not?" He goes, I said, "Because that's not what makes me who I am. I want to be remembered because I was a good dad and I was a good husband. And, I did good police work, not because I chased stripes and things like that." And this same sergeant, later on, he became a lieutenant, and then he became a lieutenant too. And then he became a captain. And all through the years, every time I would see him, he go, "Kenny, my son." And it was like that kind of relationship. And then later on, he promoted to captain. And I called him up to congratulate him because he had promoted to captain. And it didn't sound the same. He didn't sound the same to me. And then maybe a couple weeks later, I look and he's not a captain anymore. I talked to him later. He goes, "Yeah, I've always chased that, and I wanted to be a captain. And then when he got captain, he goes, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it.
Wow.
And he retired as a lieutenant. But that spoke volumes to me about don't chase the job, because the job isn't going to love you back.
Yeah, good story. Yeah, so true.
And the people that are listening to this conversation, they're gonna apply, they're gonna get hired, they're going to promote, and then some of them are going to get hurt, and they're not going to be able to be cops anymore. And if you hang your entire existence on, I'm a cop, what do you do? I'm a cop. And then all of a sudden you're not. What do you tell people, right, Scott? What do you tell people?
Oh, I mean, tell them to still make an impact other ways, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that it's important to not make it who you are, but make it what you do, and do it well.
Yeah.
So, last question for you both. What's the best advice you can give to somebody applying for a police department, and which is 1,000% different than when you guys applied in 2026? What's the best advice you can give today?
Take it away, Ernie.
Give yourself grace. This is the type of career where you're going to learn so much on the job. There's only so much they're going to teach you in the academy, but you truly have to get to understand people. I for so many years after I became a police officer, I wanted to go out there and change the world, right? That was my vision. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to change the world, arresting one person at a time, whatever, taking one gun off the street at a time. But what I realized was I couldn't change anything until I changed myself. And that was important. That was an important life lesson to learn. That meant I had to start caring about people more, because I was checking the boxes, just doing my job. I'm just doing my job, right? That seems to be the go-to line for officers, which means I really don't care about your situation because I'm just doing my job. And when you realize that that's such a cop-out and you really don't care about your community and you're just chasing numbers or checking boxes, then you have to ask yourself, what true relevancy am I doing by showing up to work every day? So take time to learn this job, but better yet, take time to change yourself as you evolve into this career.
There you go, Scott.
Well, after that, what can I add? I must say, if someone is, you mean someone like or someone that's in the application process?
Just thinking about, I want to be a cop. And what advice, if someone came up to you and said, hey, Scott, I know you were a cop, I want to be a cop too, what would you tell them?
Well, for one, just make sure you're getting into it for the right reasons. If it's about how it can make you feel, it's going to be more than about you. It has to be, because you're going to be connecting with people that you don't even know, but you have to connect with them. So if it's all about you, you're going to have a really hard time. And they're out there. There's just some people that are in it for the career, making themselves look good. And it's not optimal, in my opinion. But also when it comes to the application process, be honest. Mm-hmm. They're asking a question. They're probably going to know the answer to it. They just want to make sure you're being honest. But look at it this way. When you're being interviewed in your initial interview as an applicant, but then if you put in for, say, specialized units down the road, it's not about how much you want that position. It's what value can you bring that will help the department, but also those in the public. So remember that. Always be adding value. And it takes a lot of continuous growth as a person, but also you're going to have to sign up for training on your own and make that initiative to keep growing, because it's at many departments. I mean, heck, some are strapped so much with staffing levels that they can't send people away. So you have to make the time to read that book during downtime. Take advantage of YouTube and other technologies like podcasts that can help you train and stuff like that. Keep growing as a person and keep adding value. It's not about you.
Yeah, Scott, you said something that just jarred a thought for me. And, to be an officer, you have to be in constant growth mindset, right? You can't just have a fixed mindset every time you come to work. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm aiming for. It's unrealistic, right? You got to have this growth mindset to always be and do better. And I think the aha moment that I had with a growth mindset, when I truly thought I understood what I was doing was redefining what safety was for the community. And it could no longer be the absence of crime. It had to be the presence of well-being. And that was the well-being of the community and the well-being of the officers that were responding, because crime's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. But are we providing a community that is well? And I think that's a responsibility of law enforcement today.
Outstanding. Mm-hmm. This has been very eye-opening. What a great conversation. It's always a great conversation with Scott. And then Ernie, you add to it, and just an amazing conversation from both of you. And again, the book is called 101 Questions to Ask Before Becoming a Law Enforcement Officer. Policebackground.net and Police Applicant Podcast endorsed for this book. Anybody that listens to this podcast should buy this book. I think it touches on things that we maybe touch on the surface during the podcast, but we can no way go in depth. And this is an incredible book for you guys to buy. So I would highly encourage everyone who listens to the podcast to buy this book. And again, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a blast. Thank you.
All right. And so we will be back in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Police Applicant Podcast. You can contact us at policebackground.net. See you soon.